right, we're here today at this lovely home of Connie Wallace, talking to her, the Executive Director of AIA Tennessee. She led our organization for the last 35 years, and as of September 30th has stepped down to spend time with her family and her beautiful gardens. Connie's put up with us architects for a long time. She has a wealth of knowledge and experience. Today's an opportunity to capture some of that, some of her history, some of the history of AIA Tennessee. Connie, let's get started.
Thanks, Ty. Can I say before we
Sure.
go to your questions
Sure.
that this year has been awesome for me, and I'm so grateful to you for making it possible.
It's been my pleasure.
Well, your leadership and empathy and having my back means more than I can tell you.
Well, you're very welcome. And it's been nothing but a joy traveling around and seeing everybody and seeing the state with you.
Thank you.
Learning more than I probably should have.
Absolutely. And with more to come, I expect, in the next few minutes.
That's true. Okay, well, we have a series of questions, so we'll just go ahead and jump in.
Sure.
All right, when and how did you first get involved with AIA?
It goes a little bit beyond AIA. I was enamored with the self-awareness movement in the 60s, wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and I was working for a mental health center, and this was in the days of the Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, where money for social programs was unprecedented. And I was working for a very rich mental health center, the D.D. Wallace Center, named incidentally after one of my husband's relatives, whom I had not met at the time. So a lot of close connections there. So I was working for them, and they lost funding, and I got cut back to a half-time position. One of the board members was an architect named Lloyd Gregg, and Lloyd was a partner. He was one of the first expansion partners with Gresham Smith and Partners when they went from 2 to 5 partners. And so they suggested that I work for D.D. Wallace half-time and work for Gresham Smith half-time. I was doing public relations and marketing for both organizations. I did that for 3 months, and I pretty much had 2 full-time jobs. And you know me, I didn't go halfway with either one, so it was very exhausting. So, but I was a snob about business. I thought architecture was a business. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
And I thought I didn't want to be any place except in a social environment. I discovered architects were so much healthier than the clinical psychologists I'd been hanging with. We spent half our day venting about what felt, good and bad. And I was astounded at how much I loved Gresham Smith. They were in the first building they designed. It was all glass. First weeping cherry I ever saw was in their courtyard. Nobody had offices. The partners sat at desks in the open. The only privacy were a series of glass enclosed conference rooms. I fell in love with that whole concept. Then I learned about the cube farm, because there were cubes there.
Yeah.
But at least, lots of windows and open space. So I didn't think I'd ever want to go anyplace else. I loved Gresham Smith. But through a series of restructuring, I loved them less after 3 years. And it was because of a particular marketing director for whom I did not work well. So they won one of the few. It was the first TSA Design Award they had won. They wanted me to follow up and do some publicity on it. So I called the TSA office, asked to speak to the exec or whatever. Found out there wasn't one. And I said, "Oh, really?"
TSA being Tennessee Society of
Yes, that was the original name.
Right.
In 1953 was the first charter. So I said, "Really?" And then I was convinced that there could not possibly be a better candidate than me, discovering only later that I knew nothing about association management, didn't know that it was a career field. But I interviewed, and I was one of 85 candidates. And of course, Lloyd Gregg, the partner of Gresham Smith, was on the selection committee. So we didn't do anything furtively there. I had to tell him that I was applying for the job, and he talked it over with the other partners. He said, "Don't worry, she's one of 85, there's no way she'll be hired." And I truly don't think I was the best candidate at all. I think I was willing to work for the least money.
Oh.
So I started March 1st, 1978, literally walked out the door of Gresham and Smith, and I've already told you the story. I changed into, my first official job was to go to the Democratic Caucus reception, 5:30. I'd only been a club gal, and so I pulled out the plunging neckline, floor-length cocktail dress that I wore clubbing to show up. Of course, everybody else is in business attire, but Nobody seemed to mind because I was pretty cute back then.
Oh, you're so cute.
So that was day one. Day two was the board meeting. Granville Taylor was the president. Taylor Crump was the firm in Memphis. So Granville hired me, and the board meeting started first thing in the morning, and I was on time for it, believe it or not. Our offices were a beautiful storefront on Union, actually 6th and Union, and at that time I was watching the Polk Center, Performing Arts Center being constructed, and the building was done by Bruce Crabtree, Taylor and Crabtree. So that's a story all its own. So anyway, I show up for the board meeting, and Granville goes, "You don't have a notebook?" I don't think I even had a pen.
Whoops.
So I had a lot to learn. But that's how we got started.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, what was AIA like back then?
Well, I didn't have the sense to ask when I was interviewing for the job because, I knew from the minute I heard about it, I wanted it more than I wanted anything. So I didn't inquire about finances, and you were bankrupt. I didn't inquire about how successfully you were operating, and you weren't because we had 12 people at your last convention, which was at what was then the Hyatt Regency in Nashville.
Yeah.
12 people, probably more exhibitors than that, but who counts? And you had 287 members. And we managed the membership at that time on a series of Rolodex cards and a template that we typed for mailing labels. That was our technology.
Come a little bit farther.
We've come a long way.
So.
And I guess in terms of some of the early days, I've been thinking about this because I love to talk, you know that. So two or three things really stand out from the early days. One is that, unfortunately, you had two previous directors, and they both were addicts and pretty dysfunctional. So I was successful the first 6 months when you all could find me in the afternoon, and I was sober. So expectations were kind of low in the beginning.
Bar wasn't hard to reach.
Exactly. But the space was so beautiful. And that was something else that was typical of what we did. We always rented the sexiest office space you could find, and we would get the rent at a reasonable rate because we had to totally remodel it, of course. And so we would spend $40,000 to $60,000, which we certainly didn't have, to renovate a space from which we would be evicted in the next 1 to 2 years, because we always, had a knack for knowing, what was going to come down in order for a new high rise to go up or whatever. So we did that 5 or 6 times.
That business sense.
Exactly. Learned a lot of business from you guys. So that's one memory. But all the spaces were beautiful. William Byer, a Nashville architect, did the early designs, and he did incredibly good contemporary work. And I didn't know what contemporary architecture was at the time. One of the great things about that, so many things about that office I loved, but I was directly in the route to the Legislative Plaza, and I guess there were beginning to be issues about smoking or somebody needing a light or whatever, because I got to know the Attorney General and most of the constitutional officers when they would walk by on their way to the plaza, and they'd pop in for a smoke or to borrow a cigarette or whatever. So it was very heady to have that great storefront. The second thing about the storefront is that I met one of the most intimidating architects I ever met. Scared to death of him in the beginning, and now I love him dearly. Bruce Crabtree.
Okay.
Bruce was designing the Performing Arts Center, showing up frequently for site visits, and he walked in one day and he said, "Let's go," and I had no idea what he meant. And so he took me over and gave me a tour of the building.
Okay.
And that's when I realized how little I knew about architecture, because he was going into great detail about all the things, because it was such a multi-purpose building, and all I could say was, "Wow, really pretty," or "Oh my," just.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Got to start somewhere.
You got to learn.
Got to start somewhere. The other thing from the early days, actually, 2 more. It's okay.
Yeah, no,
okay.
Yeah.
So 2 more things. The legislature was in session March 1st when I was hired, and so there was already work to be done. John Kane from Schlott Norman Kane was the legislative chair, and he did a yeoman's job of watching out for us. And he hung out. This was Ray Blanton's administration.
Okay.
And so one went to the King of the Road in the evening to play poker do effective lobbying with the governor. I didn't do a lot of that. I didn't enjoy the evening events that much. But the first bill we identified that we were concerned about simply stated that if a building it was 50 years old, it would be declared an historic building and not torn down. Well, there were no criteria for what made it a worthy building of 50 years of age to keep.
No historic preservation
None of
society
that.
or anything.
None of that. So, and actually, there was a society, but I don't think they lobbied. So it felt like it was up to us to fix it. So I called the bill sponsor and truly had no lobbying experience at the time, just PR background. So I called and said, we don't like this bill. And his question was, well, tell me how to change it. Call you back, okay?
Yeah, just a minute.
Yeah, so that was how I discovered that we really did have a lot of influence, but that one needed to be prepared and having done the homework. So I learned to find out ahead of time what we wanted the outcome to be. And we were successful with that bill.
Right.
The last thing in terms of the early days that I remember so distinctly is that we were very politically naive, even though people like John Kane, Bruce Crabtree was very active. They knew what they were doing, but most of us did not. And this was during the transition from Governor Blanton to Lamar Alexander. And for those of you youngsters out there, Ray Blanton had done enough bad things, criminal things, that Lamar Alexander, who was, I guess, the second Republican governor since Reconstruction, was sworn in early in order to stop mass-scale pardons. I thought the governor made all the decisions that affected architects. And early in Governor Alexander's administration, we were contacted, and we were really pawns in a game of one-upsmanship with the building commission. But we didn't understand that, and very foolishly sided with the governor. And of course, we lost a lot of credibility, even not knowing what we had, and we were punished particularly by Ned McWhorter, who was the speaker at the time, for 6 years.
Wow.
For having deserted our buddies and our colleagues. So I learned then and believe to this day that the essential relationships for architects generally in Tennessee have to do with the General Assembly and with the constitutional officers. They set policy, whether you do state work or not. They determine the practice environment in Tennessee.
Sure. Okay. Well, now, how long, I guess, were you in the storefronts? How long were you there? At what point did you guys...
Less than 2 years.
Okay.
I mean, literally, we were moving, once every couple of years.
So at what point was it at that time about that the bookstore was started, or was that AP? Was that after AP?
No, actually, the bookstore was an early concept, and I think it probably was the second move.
Okay.
We went to a second storefront. We had a lot more space, and it felt like a Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney movie to me. We kind of sit around and say, what if we had a bookstore? What if we put on a play? And so whatever was, we didn't have a master plan.
Yeah.
We really didn't look at financial consequences very carefully at all. Just seemed like a good idea to do a bookstore. And it was semi-successful in Collegedale casework, working with Kotzen Binkley, Larry Binkley specifically, Knoxville architect, gave us all of the casework.
Wow.
For the secretarial space and for the bookstore itself. And we were empty for 9 to 12 months because that's how long it took them to manufacture it.
Oh.
But we had state-of-the-art.
Free wasn't exactly high on their priority. Probably.
Exactly. And now everybody I know probably has at least one of those bookcases. Because when we determined the lack of financial viability, we had some surplus furniture to share. But, live and learn.
That's right.
And in those days, none of the chapters were staffed. And so it truly was, if you have a good idea and somebody supports it, then let's go for it.
Okay.
And I think, one of the many healthy things we've done through the years was to very carefully define the role of the state, kind of the stepchild between national and local.
Right.
And it's not a very sexy definition, but it's a good working definition that AIA Tennessee should only do those things it does best.
Correct.
And it doesn't need to be messing with what the locals or national can do better.
I think that system works.
Yeah,
Has
I do
worked,
too.
and it's still working, and we'll see how it goes from here.
I do too. The
So-
other thing about those early days is that everybody smoked.
Oh,
Board meetings were smoking. I never smelled smoke, you know. And when we began to be culturally sensitive, environmentally aware, we would simply define one end of the table
oh,
in the conference room smoking, the other end non-smoking.
no secondhand.
No,
nothing about that. at all.
Nothing about that.
Well, that's funny. But was it then you were selling contracts out of the bookstore, or were you selling contracts out of the office?
And they were one and the same.
They're the same. Okay.
Yeah. Contract documents were there when I came on, and they were a significant source of income, the paper documents.
And a source of your future, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. It was 1981, early March, when Jay Wallace, a contractor, walked in the bookstore to buy a document. And 35 years later, we're still together.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great story. He had no idea how much that would cost, that document, did he?
No, a couple of college educations, some really nice jewelry.
Oh, you know.
It's worked well. This
You know,
place.
he should get an award for putting up with us.
Well, you
architects,
very
too.
kindly did that,
You
you
know,
know.
I mean, so that was, you know, he's been there for you.
Well,
And-
it certainly meant a lot to him to be acknowledged, and what a job he did at my celebration.
Oh,
I thought he's so cool.
and the ponytail's awesome.
Oh yeah.
So, at what point did Association Partners come about, and what made you kind of decide you wanted to form a company?
You know, in a way, it was not a good idea for me, but it's probably the only way I was able to stay with you guys.
Okay.
And it's sort of a long story and sort of a miraculous story. I believe that I've walked into a lot of ordinary circumstances and have caught magic. You know, I think there's been a lot of magic in my life. And so in the 80s, I was a superstar nationally. And that, you know, maybe sounds really cocky. And actually, Greg Nedek used to call me can't even say it.
Aggrandizing?
Thank you, yeah. It's kind of, well, if I don't toot my horn, who will?
Well, you're probably the only one doing it and doing it well. I mean, you know,
Exactly.
nobody else was doing it well, so.
Exactly. So, again, some just a lot of serendipity in my life. Excuse me, I became active in the American Society of Association Executives
Okay.
because this is a career field and has a certification program, and I am certified, and I was elected a charter fellow, one of 15 in the country, the first year that they instituted that, and I think that was about 1988. And you know me well enough to know that no is pretty much not my vocabulary. And I didn't know when to quit because everything sounds like fun. One of my favorite TV shows was Maude with
Oh,
B.
yeah.
Arthur. And I'll never forget something she said in the middle of the show when they were debating on career, mother, you know, nurturing wife, you know, how can you do it all? And she said so passionately, I want it all. Well, me too. And I don't manage all that well when I try to take it all. But I was very active in CASE, serving on their executive committee.
Which is, just for definition.
Yeah, the Council of Architectural Component Executives.
Okay.
It's about 150 staff people who do the local and state components. So I was active with CASE. I had awesome friends at the Institute, and was active in the Tennessee Society of Association Executives, and the CEO for the national group was from Brownsville, Tennessee. So he had a special place in his heart for Tennesseans. And when I got my CAE, I think I was the first woman in Tennessee to get it, and I was one of the first people to get the certification. And it happened to be the 25th anniversary of the program, the year I came in, and so Bill wanted to do a celebration in Chicago at the Marriott, and I met the Marriotts, by the way,
Oh, cool.
senior and junior, very nice people. I met them through Bill. Bill wanted one of the first CAEs to speak, and then he wanted somebody sort of midterm, then he wanted somebody brand new.
Okay.
So he invited me to speak, and we didn't have the money to send me to Chicago, but I guess I pulled it out of somewhere personally. Went up there, and we actually were in the middle of another one of our moves. We'd been evicted again with the office, but I was so honored to be asked. And sometimes I'm just an amazing speaker, other times not so much. But that night, in front of about 11,000 people, I knocked them dead. And the two men were the other speakers, and they were very sort of ponderous, and And I just gushed about the awesomeness of the organization, the fact that I couldn't imagine somebody as small town as me, could have an impact on that organization. And I got a standing ovation at the end of my speech. And 2 weeks later, I was invited to serve on the board of ASAE, the national board. And at that time, fam trips are familiarization tours, and what it was bribery for meeting planners that again went on in the 80s. I guess the hospitality industry just had tons of money to spend, and so for every board meeting, Jay and I both were invited. All our expenses were paid. I went to Hawaii, I went to Pebble Beach. I mean, it was just an incredible 3 years. And like a year later, I was inducted as a charter fellow. So all this stuff is going on, and it's so very heady. And I believe in generational differences. I believe that decades are defined differently, different sets of values. And I've forgotten which group it was, but the group on our board in the 80s and I did not get along. And I probably was 10 years older than them. Okay. We really had dissimilar values. And even though I'd gone to the board, asked for permission to serve with ASAE and with CASE, because again, being unable to say no, I also assumed the presidency of CASE. Same time, and the value system was pretty different in the 80s. People weren't expected to stay in a job long term, and loyalty wasn't valued very much, and there was almost something wrong with you if you didn't want to move on. And I remember Vance Travis saying to me, Vance is a Chattanooga architect who was president in the early 80s, I think. Vance said to me, as good as you are, I know you'll move on. And the message stuck with me, and it was almost, if I stay, then I'm not very good, am I? And it was really a quandary for me. At the same time, ASAE, the people I was meeting there were saying, you're not reaching your potential. Why are you hiding out in Nashville when you could be running an organization in New York or Washington, D.C.? And Jay and I talked about it, and Jay said, I have a job and you have a career. And if you want to go to New York or D.C., I'll go with you. And so we really considered it, and TSA also had an unworkable economic cycle going. We literally could not keep up with inflation and just the cost of doing business, much less increases in salary and all that. And so we were stuck in a cycle of having to increase dues every 5 years, and it was becoming untenable. And so I saw a picture where TSA couldn't afford me any longer. I also was chafing under the restrictions of having to beg for each continuing education course I attended, and just to do a lot, raises were very few and far between, and it was kind of degrading to have to really ask and scrape for it. So again, I kept thinking about, what am I going to do? And then I realized, in terms of values, I love Nashville, I love TSA, I wanted to stay. And so I began looking for a vehicle that allowed me to stay. And a dear friend of mine, Kathy Jackson, who ran AI Mississippi, had already launched a management company. And I was talking to her about my quandary, because I still didn't think that's what I wanted to do. But she said, bring your budget and come down here and I'll show you how to do it. And so we literally sat down with a very simple one-page TSA budget, and we learned what would remain TSA expense and what my management company would pick up. And so the bottom line is that I walked away that weekend with a very workable concept where I could go to TSA and say, contract with me, allow me to add staff, allow me to work with other people, meanwhile maintaining my allegiance to you. And so the contract negotiations took 18 months. And that basic contract is still exists today. And it says that I only lobby for AIA, lots of things like that. So it was an 18-month negotiation. And I remember the planning retreat in Gatlinburg, the year the decision was made, and I had a facilitator, and Kim Settle, who was my partner at the time, because I was smart. Kim, I didn't want to make it easy for you guys to tell me no. And so the logical thing for you to do, if you weren't going to accept my proposal, was to turn around and hire Kim. So I beat you to the punch.
Smart.
And I asked her to be my partner. And so she became a 30% partner of nothing at the time. And so that planning retreat in Gatlinburg, they hired a facilitator who told a lot of stories about whether you wanted to go to Abilene or not. And Kim and I spent almost the entire weekend just sitting in the hall, lobby of the hotel while everybody negotiated what to do. And I was pretty honored with the way the decision came down. It came down to, do you want Connie or not? And if you want her, are you willing to take a chance? And they voted yes.
History was made.
History was made. Yep.
And that was about what,
1990.
90? Okay.
Yeah, we started in '88, and then 1990 is when we wrapped it up.
Okay.
That's neat. So in that 25 years,
Maybe saved AIA too.
well, there's been one dues increase.
Yeah.
And the proposal cut your budget by 30%. And funny because nobody knew if it was going to work or not, because I bought your physical assets. So we set aside $30,000, which was hard for us to come by in those days. And we said we'll never touch that $30,000 because that's what it would cost at the time to rebuild your office and to set yourselves up independently. So far, so good.
So far, so good. Well, so what in that time and kind of coming through here, who've been some of your favorite characters, kind of in your 35-year history?
You know,
Just a few highlights.
I've always been drawn to bad boys.
Oh.
Yeah, I was Team Edward, never Team Jacob, Twilight. And so I like rebels. I like people who go against the grain. I like people with sense of humor. I like intelligent people. And I like characters, so I like creativity. So with that, and my God, I've had the opportunity to meet some of the most incredible people in the world, who kind of fit those criteria. So top of the list is probably Reed Kroloff.
Reed.
I adore Reed. I adore Reed. I met him, and I actually have two women on my list, if I can remember. One of them is Dean Marlene Davis, and Marlene introduced me to Reed, and so that's how that friendship started.
Academic
yeah, exactly. She appointed me to her advisory board, and I think I had the longest tenure of anybody on it because I was
still
on
on it?
No, I actually rolled off last March.
Oh, okay.
And Ashley's on. Ashley got appointed
right,
this fall.
that's right.
Yeah. But so Dean introduced me to Reed, and I love that man. I love him. He's spoken to about 3 of our conventions, and one of the most fun weekends I ever had was a weekend I spent in New York with him.
Oh.
Yeah, we're all above board, because he was the Design Awards chair.
Sure.
And we met in a Manhattan penthouse, and that's where the jury was chaired. It's just so much fun. So Reed's at the top of my list. Do you know that Bob Holzapfel is a great humorous writer?
Oh, yeah.
He is. He's awesome sense of humor, because I always had a close connection to the licensing board appointees, and they tended to keep their positions for 10 to 12 years, and I would go on their retreats, so we all became close. So Bob Holzapfel's another one of my favorites, and he wrote, I think it was a quarterly column, and I'll find those before I'm done, because we should get this on the website. He did a humor column for every newsletter and every magazine.
Wow.
And they are in the office somewhere.
Somewhere.
Yep. Jim Franklin, all of the same reasons, and he and I, along with Michael Emmerich, created the Tennessee Architect magazine. That was viable for about 5 years, and it was tough to make a magazine work. When we decided to shut it down, segue back to my good buddy Kathy Jackson, who said, I want you and Robert Ivy to sit down and talk about maybe doing a regional Architecture South magazine. And I knew Robert, he had like a one-man office at the time, but he had just completed the book he wrote on Faye Jones. Right. And Robert had always had the dueling passions of architecture and writing. And so that was an amazing 5-year run that we all did with Architecture South. And those quarterly board meetings, editorial board meetings, the most fun I ever had. And Ann Aiken is the second woman on my list for obvious reasons. I hated it when Ann chose Marriage and Family over AIA because she was awesome for us. I thought she should have been the first woman president of AIA Tennessee, and National wanted her, for national office.
National, yeah.
Yeah, they just adored her. But she said she named her kid AIA. Those initials. But she her practice really became secondary to being a homemaker.
Yeah.
But that,
right.
and she goes to Haiti and builds schools and churches, and so
She's had an impact just in other
Oh,
ways. Yeah.
she's amazing too. And who am I forgetting? Because I had a little list for you. Let's see. Yeah. Flem Smith was my mentor. Working with him, Gresham and Smith, he had me believing there was nothing I couldn't do. And he turned me into a profit center when I worked for them. And so I was doing client PR for HCA and hospital affiliates, so that was, amazing in itself. Charlie Waterfield, Nashville architect who's had two passions, historic preservation and sailing. And I don't have a brain to be a good sailor because he liked to race. And if you weren't essential, you didn't get on that boat. But I learned how to be essential because I cooked. So I crewed for Charlie for several years, and then Ed Johnson and Ed Street were the two others that I jotted down here. Ed Johnson, I always hated that we didn't name our Lifetime Achievement Award for Ed Johnson. He was a consummate volunteer. I never knew anybody who could do it better. And Ed Street was crippled with the most horrific type of arthritis there was, and it killed him. But he never let it stop him, And he was on the licensing board for many years, and Ed was the first chair of a PAC.
Okay.
So
I'm sure there are a whole lot more that
but
you
those
could
are
probably mention. But
those are way at the top of my list. And you too, Scott.
Oh.
You too, for real. We've known each other a long time too.
We have, kind of like my den mother.
Yeah.
Growing up,
I raised you good.
I hope. Well, we'll see. What do you think some of your greatest accomplishments have been, kind of over your career? What are you most proud of, I guess?
Honestly, I think the thing I do best is identify people with talent and talk them into giving us free work.
Talk them into helping, yes.
Yeah.
Like the phone call. Hey, do you want to be on a board for me? Sure, I'll be on a board. All right, well, you'll be president.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I really think that's my greatest skill. I think of Soporn and the incredible work she's done on our graphics for the past 5 years. I think of Jeannie Myers. So many people. So I think tapping them. The second thing is that as bossy and talky as I am, I don't enjoy being autocratic. I love collaboration. It's kind of like, okay, we'll both take the blame if we screw this up. And so I think I'm a really good collaborator, and I think that's worked well in working with boards. I only had 2 presidents in 35 years that I truly disliked. And I think that's pretty amazing. We won't talk about them. And I think that we have amazing relationships with AGC, ABC, the engineers, landscape architects, because I'd much rather switch than fight.
And the building commission and the state.
Yes.
And the state office.
Yeah.
Those have been
I love
hard
that.
built.
I love that. And then the one other thing that's so important is our Practice Act.
Yes.
Because we had such a vague Practice Act, it was unenforceable. And I look back now and I can't believe it. Metro codes did not enforce stamped plans. Metro Nashville codes. A builder could walk in unstamped plans, no questions asked.
Wow.
And it wasn't just changing the law, but it was the educational process that went along with it. And one of the things that I love about our licensing board is that they've always stepped up, and there may be more states now, but we were one of the first states to institute civil penalties, and this was their idea, not ours. And so they can fine a non-registrant thousands and thousands of dollars. And it was a very rich tool for us. And they've never shied away from that. And
Still in place.
And today they're continuing the trend by beginning to educate the municipalities who are asking architects to low bid work.
Right.
And by the way, guys, if that ever happens to you, if you can send a copy of the RFP to the licensing board, they'll take it from there and deal with them.
Yeah.
It's very professional.
That's fantastic. So, what do you think out of all this you'll miss the most?
I don't know. I'm going to miss the people.
Oh.
And so many people. But, I'm hoping, that I'll have time to throw parties and see people in different ways. And it was interesting because I was in a business group for several years. We meet monthly, we share financials and all this stuff. And I talked about retirement probably 10, 15 years ago. And the one question they challenged me with is, where will you get your applause? Because I do enjoy being the center of attention, I must say. But I have faith that I'll find a new audience.
He'll still be here.
Exactly.
Just, we have to travel to where you are to give you the applause. That's where it is. I guess if you had any advice to sort of give to future leaders of our AI Tennessee, what would that be?
3 things come to mind for me. One, I got from Frank Stasiowski. Frank is a really brilliant marketing guy who founded PSMJ. Yeah. He's the one who gets tanner and blonder and wears my gold every year, right, Frank? We're Facebook friends. But Frank's just brilliant. If you need a new marketing plan, whatever, can't find anybody better than Frank. But what he said very simply was, find that service everybody's scared of and make it yours. And the example I would give you is probably Ron Gobble and the firm Gobble Hayes. I think Ron went to all those seminars, and the first thing he did was pick up asbestos abatement, and he branched out from there to do a lot of environmental work. And he has offices all over the country, and has built a very successful practice on doing the thing everybody else was scared of. Just have enough insurance. And today I'm watching him. He did hotels until all the money dried up, and now he's a bridging architect. And I just read the paper and I say, whoa, he got more metro work. But he loves being a bridging agent because you don't do much, but you get paid really well.
You get paid.
Yeah. So that's one piece of advice. Take a chance. The second piece of advice, and this is tough, and I'm sorry I'm not going to be here to see it through. You guys got to deal with design build. Yeah. And you got to find a way to make it profitable and to take back the master builder role. And I mean, boy, is that easier said than done.
If it's going to be here, find a way to own it.
You got to do that. And I do think there are models to do it. Actually, I think I have 4 pieces of advice. The third one is, and I thank Bill Nolan for this, we were talking about a particular lobbyist, Ashley, I knew exactly, we were talking about a particular lobbyist who has also been a public official at the local level. And 2 things about him that I think are insane. One is he won't serve on any kind of jury. He won't make any kind of judgment because he thinks it would have political consequences. To me, that's just crazy. But the second piece of it is that, and there was a time when I had to lobby jointly with him on some issues, he would compromise into meaninglessness any piece of legislation so he could say he won. And I learned from, and I find this also with young lobbyists, they're so eager to please legislators, or they hear, I'm already hearing that the governor is going to come out for this P3 legislation, and so we'll have to give up. Bill Nolan taught me we never give up. And I don't know anybody who does a better job than Bill of not compromising and of staying with the principled right thing to do. And he takes great pride in saying that he loves working with architects because they're right on the issues. Unfortunately, our enemies, or even people who just don't understand architects very well, don't get that. And they believe that we're always acting from a position of self-interest. Right. And of course there is that, but we got to find a way to communicate better, and that's for the next exam.
There's self-interest in bigger things,
exactly.
Things that are bigger than us.
Exactly. And I think I forgot the 4th thing, but
what about advice to Ashley? What about maybe?
Well, I've told her trust your gut.
Okay.
I told her to call Scott if she gets in trouble. and
she's got your phone number.
Yes, she has my phone number, and I'll be around. The other thing I've told her, and Lisa wrote it down last night, Lisa's the president of the Association of Partners, or will be at the end of the year, is that boards create policy and staff executes policy. And I think it's really important to keep those roles defined and separate.
What, something a little different here. What's a fun fact about yourself that maybe nobody knows about, or there's kind of something that you always want to tell somebody but never have about yourself? But it doesn't have to be bad. It could be just something.
Well, it's really funny.
That you like to do that you never really share. I don't know.
John Tice was a board member way back in the 80s, who worked for Taylor and Crabtree, and he really came up the ranks in AIA, but he moved to Florida. But he was on our board for a short time, and he walked in one day just grinning from ear to ear, bringing me an advertisement for a movie clipping, Connie Hoffman, porn star. Wasn't me. Was not me. But I did do something similar. I lived in Tokyo for 3 years in the late 60s, and again, walked in to do something mundane. I applied for a job as a secretary for Nippon Polaroid. It was the Japanese headquarters of the Polaroid film and camera company, and they were headquartered in Boston. And so I interviewed with the general manager, and I took the steno test and the typing test and all that. And he called me back into his office and he said, "What the hell made you think you were qualified for this job?" I don't know. And he was very brusque, and I mean, just very typical Bostonian. And he said, "But I really like you." And he said, "You go home and you think about what you could do for Nippon Polaroid that would add value, and I'll do the same. And whoever comes up with something, call the other." I thought, okay, that's the nicest blow-off I ever got. Because he hired a lovely Israeli woman with a British accent to be his assistant. I think that was the day when all the foreign assistants became very, or the clipped accents became very in vogue for corporations.
Not the southern accent.
Not my southern accent, which was probably Grundy at the time. But he called me the next day. And he said, "Okay, why don't you teach English to our staff?" Because that was the day when if you bought a foreign product, you got the crazy pidgin English directions that made no sense.
Oh, yeah.
And so the people at Nippon Polaroid spoke varying degrees of English. But it was my job to make them more proficient. Had a blast.
That's exciting.
So he said, "Make me a lesson plan." And I had, I knew men whose goal was to be kamikaze pilots.
Wow.
I knew so many incredible people and got to know Japanese in a way I never would have otherwise. But the thing very few people know is that at the time I was a platinum blonde. It was the first miniskirt era, and pantyhose had been invented while I was over there. And my husband went back for a funeral, actually. Came back and brought me all the pantyhose. It was the thrill of my life. But so poor boy skirt, a mini skirt, poor boy sweater, tights, platinum blonde hair. I was Connie Swinger because they were launching a new camera called the Polaroid Swinger camera. And what it was a cheaper version, and the idea that you could take a picture and develop the negative in 60 seconds was just amazing. People lined up around the block to get their picture taken with Connie Swinger, and then I would autograph their Polaroid.
Okay, there's got to be some of those around somewhere.
There is.
That would be a great thing to have on file somewhere.
I tried to find it for you for the celebration. Hasn't surfaced yet, but I haven't.
That's fine.
Yep.
Promise of the future, that'll be out
Indeed.
there someday.
Indeed.
So, speaking of the future, what are your plans?
I don't have
What do
any.
you do now?
I don't have any. When I talked about, gosh, maybe forming AP was a mistake on one level. I sat with my husband and my daughter when I was contemplating starting AP back in 1988, and I said, "Guys, I can't manage GSA very well, and I don't have really good organizational skills." I said, "What makes us think I could do a whole company with all this multiple stuff?" And the truth of it is, I never did a very good job of maintaining balance. And so, I think I did a good job of running AIA and a semi-good job of AP. I like to mentor people, and that's one thing I do well. But I lost a lot of my personal life, so I'm on a quest to get it back.
Okay.
And who knows what's next? I mean, you've seen my house and you've seen the landscape. I've got a few do-it-yourself projects to go through
no,
here.
it's your passion. That's a passion for you.
It is. But I love not having many plans. My one granddaughter is a freshman at the University of Alabama. But I adore her, and so, I'll go spend some time with her. My other 3 grandkids are, Fletcher's in his second year of college, and the other 2 are getting close, so I'll spend more time with them. And Jay's just kind of still trying to figure out what's going on. Is it, you cooked again?
And this will be the first retreat that you have not been to in a long time, and I believe that's your anniversary
You're
weekend.
right.
Is that right?
It is indeed.
So that'll be
That'll be lovely.
that'll
Yes.
be exciting.
Yes.
I'm sure
Yeah.
he's appreciated.
Yep.
We'll appreciate that. So.
Now, I must say, I'm discovering it's harder for me to stop meddling than I thought it might be.
Wow.
But I think Ashley will learn to tune me out.
There's meddling, and then there's being there when she needs your help.
I hope. I hope
think-
that's what I can do effectively.
Well, I do appreciate this, you taking time to do this, and I want to say something that I really believe. And we're sitting here in these beautiful gardens that you'll continue to nurture. And I believe that your experience with AIA Tennessee has been like your experience with your gardens. You started with a ragtag group of wild weeds, brought them back to life, nurtured them with organization and connection. Connection to the surrounding community of other green things, cut them back when necessary, and planted and tendered new seeds for the future. Like this garden, AIA continues to grow and flourish under your guidance and what you've done. We have a strong root system built to weather anything the future may hold. From my heart, thank you for being our gardener.
Oh, Scott, pleasure is all mine.
It really is. It's
all
been
mine.
a pleasure, and we can't wait to see what happens to you in the future.
I love you, man.
Love you.
Thank you so much. You have no idea how much it means to me that you captured this.
Well, hopefully it worked. We'll see.
Thanks, guys. Come see me.
Bye-bye.